Good afternoon. I hope everybody enjoyed that delicious lunch. Maybe just a big round of applause for the caterers. So to kick off our afternoon session, I'd like to invite Lindsay Blair to the stage from 2B Developments.
Hello? I didn't know if I would need a stool or not behind here. I'm pretty short. Okay. So good afternoon. It's been a really incredible day so far. I've certainly been enjoying meeting many people, listening and learning. I definitely want to say a thanks to the whole team that's put this together. You've done a really great job, so thanks again. I said to Sandra right before we broke to lunch that her and I and Shauna Stone should start a peer support group for going through planning. It can be pretty stressful, so I definitely appreciated your comments, and I'll be speaking to some of those today too. So, as introduced, my name is Lindsay Blair. I'm the founder, executive director, and project manager for 2B Developments. I wear a lot of hats. We focus on small-scale rental developments, primarily in Lanark County. We manage projects from land analysis and acquisition, concept to design, planning, and construction. A focus of our developments is that they create some level of affordability and accessibility. While managing 2B Developments, this year I also joined forces with Graham at CADCO. And as Graham mentioned, CADCO is part of CCOC. My role at CADCO is Director of Real Estate Development. We manage projects through all phases, and we are experts in obtaining grants and funding for projects. I've been in the construction and development industry for 14 years. My very first property I purchased was in Smiths Falls, which kickstarted my career before I turned 20. I was raised in Perth for most of my childhood. I come to Perth at least once a week, and I still call it home. So similar to Lanark County, my ties to the county, I think, are the same ties that many of you have to this county. Being a part of the development community in Perth and that county is extremely important to me. Recently, as I've been driving down the streets, I've been seeing people sleeping on the streets. I've never seen that in my entire life growing up in Perth, and this year it's right in front of us. Today's keynote is on municipal tools for success to accelerate small-scale development. And for further context, this is rural-based and rental-based. Caroline and I spoke leading up to the summit about a project that 2B Developments had recently completed at 188 Chambers Street in Smiths Falls. This was a project that we did with Lanark County Housing Corporation. Shauna, who's sitting over there, we still talk to each other, so that's a good sign. The project created 5 affordable units. I told Caroline about how the project was a success and how we had used the tool to make it a success. But I'd also communicated some areas of the process that I thought could be improved and other hurdles we faced, and that's why I'm here today. When I talk about small-scale development, to me that means anywhere from 1 to 3 floors, staying within Part 9 of the building code, and that means anywhere from 4 to 16 units, give or take. Most importantly, and why I think we want to enhance this type of development, is because these projects can and should be built in under a year. Often, they are built by small local developers. Lanark County Housing and 2B were first introduced in September of 2021. The task was find or build rental units that would have occupancy by March of 2023. There were some funding restrictions that we had to adhere to. We had a fixed budget to work with, and we were literally starting at square one. We had to find a property and then buy it, create the strategy and design concept, execute all the planning involved, get our building permit, and then build it. 18 months is what we had to do that in. Most would say, I think most who are developers in this room, 18 months is only enough time to maybe find the land and maybe do all the planning. But we did it. This was our starting point. We had found a piece of land that was reasonably priced, and this is 2021, okay? The land was zoned light industrial and also in proximity to the rail. There were no services that extended down the street or into the property. Part of our requirements, because of the proximity to the railway, was to get a phase 1. We also had to submit an RSC filing, for anyone in the room that knows what that is. Our planning involved submitting a zoning amendment and site control plan application. And this is why most people would say 18 months is only enough to do just that. Through the fall, we found this land, created the concept, engaged our project partners, which included people like Christine from Q9. We submitted our application in early 2022 for the site control plan and the zoning amendment. The zoning amendment application was heard in the spring and passed. The site control plan agreement became officially complete in October of 2022. So 10 months of planning, which is fast. The construction took about 7 months, including holidays, once we got our permit. If you add all these up, that's actually about 20 months, but we only had 18. And we still got it done because we used a tool, which I'll get to soon. And it's not a construction tool, it's a planning tool. In June, while still in planning, we had gone ahead and done what we could on the land. We removed the structures and prepared the site to the point that we could without a building permit. We were still going back and forth for several site control plan items and comments. That's why I don't have hair. We started to get to a point where the project team was concerned about the timeline and winter would be approaching. So we used a tool, a conditional building permit. At the time, this tool was rarely used, and so the process still took some time to get one. But at the end of August, we finally got one, and our planning was still ongoing. And because of this, we were able to move along certain parts of the project, which ultimately saved the project. 2 weeks after we got our conditional building permit, this is where the site progressed to. We were doing a slab foundation, and so we were able to rough in plumbing, which we did before pouring the slab. There was a large amount of prep work to be done before we could pour, which we were able to complete. And on September 15th, the slab was done. We were ready for framing. I will say that using prefabricated wall panels was a huge contributor to our framing moving forward. And I have to give a shout out to P3 Panels. They're based out of Smiths Falls, and they were an amazing project partner to work with. 2 weeks later, the framing of the structure was wrapping up with the final roof sheeting. The site was getting ready for both interior and exterior trades. A week after that, our roof prep was starting. The front entrance slab and structure was completed. And again, trades were tackling work both inside and outside. When the middle of October came, we had our roof work wrapping up, exterior wrapping being completed, and we were getting ready for soffit and fascia. On the inside, electrical roughing was about 80% complete, plumbing was 100% complete, our windows and doors were on the way, and we were ready to start installation soon. So by mid-month of October, the site control plan had just been completed. And at this point, we achieved 30% completion at least on the project. Had we not obtained a conditional building permit, the site would have still looked like it did in June. But because of this one tool, we're able to close up the shell with windows and doors on the way, and we were moving towards installation. In some cases, maybe all cases, this would be time saved on interest that would otherwise be accruing while the land sat still and waited for planning to be finished. Interest is not just accrued during construction. Most have to borrow to cover their soft costs, and every expense incurred, which includes interest, goes to what is charged to the tenant. A conditional building permit could also enable construction funding to be started or to be released. Most times, that's a condition to a lender, to obtain a building permit before you get that first draw. And in some cases, on that first draw, a lender will advance funds to help cover the cash flow used to cover your planning cost. This is high priority cash flow. So this tool is and can be quite powerful, and I think it needs to be used more often. 3 keys to success on the Chambers project. Definitely the building permit. Obtaining that conditional building permit pushed us ahead. I didn't have to worry about funding, and if I did have to worry about funding, that definitely would have been an impact on the project. And it was a complete team effort. We had the mayor, the chief fire inspector, everyone in every department knew that this project had to be built on time, and the team effort certainly contributed to it happening. Now, getting a conditional building permit did not bypass or mean that we did not obtain a full and complete building permit. It created a speed lane. The remainder of the building permit was issued after the site control plan agreement was registered. And there are other tools that I think that can be created or enhanced to have just as much of an impact as the one that we created for this project. These are all focused within the planning phase of a project. Planning, sometimes, most times, actually takes longer than building. We actually built our project in less time than what it took to go through the planning. The more tools that we create a roadmap for and use, which I personally think should be on files that have affordability and accessibility, will help move more developments forward to construction. Once you have a building permit, funding aside, it's easy. So the first item is parking. Almost every file needs parking relief when we're looking at any kind of low-rise, multi-unit development within the rural context, at least that I've come across. For Chambers, we built 5 units, 2 of which were accessible. And at the time, we were required to create 7 parking spots. When I go to this site, and when I have gone to this site over the last several months, only 2 are being used. From my experience, most times when creating affordable units and accessible units, there's a high chance that those tenants don't have vehicles. And this needs to start being considered and part of the roadmap to addressing parking. In the case of Chambers, 2 of 5 units, our occupants are using 2 of 7 spots. How do we not scare away an applicant from submitting an application looking for this type of relief? Can a roadmap for addressing parking be created? And I think so. All of which, of course, is going to have to be within reason. If there is a roadmap around how it can be addressed, it could lower the expense of going through the process, the time involved going back and forth, and perhaps lessen the burden of the reports. It can also make clear how this approach can be achieved with reason to not scare applicants away. So some ideas I have on parking, one is a sliding scale. For example, your first 3 units, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. For any units above 3 under 10, it's a 1-to-2 ratio. Any units above 10, it's a 1-to-3 ratio. That's a roadmap, and that's the type of clarity and map that we need to see within the planning documents to not scare applicants away. You can add in affordability clauses that trigger this roadmap to be used, such as if 30% of the development is affordable, this approach can be used. This encourages applicants to consider affordable and accessible units within their developments while also pushing their planning ahead. And I'm smiling at Shauna on one of these points here. A big feedback that we had was the process of all the forms. Digitize the process. Every time we had a revision or a comment, it was such an endeavor to get everything sent back to the town. So I would have to send it to my planners, I'd have to go pick it up, I'd have to drive it to the town, and they wouldn't be able to look at it until they had the hard copy. That's ridiculous. Because we were also trying to go quick, and everyone was on board with that, we were getting so much back and forth on the comments that we started to lose track of them. So an idea that I have is creating a portal that you, can upload everything to, digitizing that process. Comments and feedbacks can be given on that portal. You can upload your revisions. Your building permit can be issued through it. Your building permit comments can be issued through it. You then have a digitized record for years to come. That's a rant. So other tools, okay, as I said, I didn't have to go through the funding on the project for Chambers, which obviously was a hurdle that I was so happy to not have to jump over. Especially in private development, we're frankly left out, to be honest. And pre-development funding is definitely something I think we need to focus on. I've seen a few types of grants that some towns have, such as, we'll give you $5,000 if you want to create a studio within your garage, a modular home, $25,000 if you create a development that's going to have some level of affordability. It's important to put those funds towards what will actually make an impact, and it's not during construction, but planning. Creating a pre-development fund is necessary and helps an applicant with carrying the costs that have to be covered during planning. I've seen pre-development funding programs work. There was one in Ottawa. It doesn't exist anymore after this year, and I think we're going to feel that. But I mean, that's just another rant. These are grants that are not given to the applicant after the project's done, but rather throughout the planning process. The funding is advanced through milestone payments, which further incentivizes both the applicant and the town or the county to work together, which speaks to the power of the team effort that I referenced with one of the successes of the Chambers project. Personally, I think pre-development funding can be the most impactful source of funding that a builder or developer can receive for a project. It has the highest impact. I also know within towns and counties, you don't have large pools of resources to pull from, like, for example, Ottawa or Toronto. And that's why you see ranges of funding anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000. Most small-scale developments that I do have planning costs that, for all activities and applications, that will range anywhere from $75,000 to maybe $150,000. These same projects have construction costs that are anywhere from $2 to $4 million. $25,000 against $2 or $4 million is nothing. $25,000 against $75,000 to $150,000 is extremely impactful. This gets a project to a building permit. And so if we only have a small pool of funding to draw from, that's where I think it should be applied. Applicants and builders generally have to cover 100% of their planning cost up front, unless we want to borrow at 12%. It's incredibly costly and often what I think sinks a project. We know there are not massive amounts available, so again, this is where I think it should be prioritized. I think overall, the one thing I'd want to say to my last slide is, again, making a clear roadmap. I know that there are a lot of provisions within the OP on how to address things, for example, like density, but it's not clear. And so as a municipality at the town level, what you can do is create very clear roadmaps so that applicants aren't scared off. Tie it to affordability, tie it to accessibility, have it be within reason, but help create that roadmap so that we aren't doing 12 months of back and forth. And I guess oh, that was quite quick. I guess to wrap this up, I've got two pictures. So this is where the site was. I think this was early December, and then that's where it ended up. So that's it. Any questions? No? Yes? No?
So what is the downside risk of the conditional building permit? So, obviously you have to take on some risk that if you're not able to meet those conditions, now you've got plumbing and slab, depending on how far along you are. So can you touch on that a little bit?
For sure. We actually had a lot of pushback on trying to get that conditional building permit because of risk. We've seen it be used quite a bit in Ottawa, so I can also draw from that perspective too. But essentially, you want to make sure that whatever relief the application is seeking on a zoning application perspective, I would say, such as setbacks, so building setbacks from a driveway, the interior lot lines, you do want to have that part of the application approved and passed. Because ultimately, if that's not approved and passed and then it's denied, it could impact your building footprint. So in our case, we had gone past and had our zoning amendment application approved for all the minor setbacks that we were seeking. And we were really just working through, do we have 5 boxwoods or do we have like 10? Like that was like the back and forth that we were talking about. It had absolutely no impact on the building. And so that's why if you have your minor variance or your zoning bylaw amendment approved and passed the appeal period, I feel it's safe because ultimately you're just working through where garbage is going to go, if you're going to have a maple tree or whatever, right? That's a lot of what you work through on the site control plan. But you do have to get through your relief applications first to know that that footprint could never be at risk of being changed.
Thank you, Mayor Nancy Peckford, obviously, and Warden here. Do you have a sense of why the City of Ottawa would have discontinued that grant program? I mean, clearly, I took to heart what you said about everyone having a vested interest in you getting through the process, and that team approach certainly seems to be one that will help to accelerate some of these smaller scale developments. So just curious to know what the City of Ottawa's rationale might have been. And before you answer, of course, I do want to thank you. You know, certainly in my time as an elected official, I think the whole planning process is such a mystery in certain ways, and we don't really contemplate it till we're in these positions. And I know our planners work so hard and are so diligent. So the capacity to create that sort of team environment, which I think many planners are endeavoring to do anyway, but the more we can create the conditions for some of that sustained dialogue certainly seems to be a really important way forward. But just curious to know about that City of Ottawa decision. Not that you can speak for the City of Ottawa, but seems to be a really interesting way to incentivize and motivate.
Yeah, so I've been new to that pre-development program. I just came to CADCO 6 months ago. And I believe that program was created through the Action Ottawa funding. And so now they're going through the accelerator funding. Not to say that they won't create a new pre-development program with those funds, but that the program's kind of ended because of a previous program. And yeah, I would say, and I'm speaking from like some current experience in both Perth and Smiths Falls, I see that the planners and files that I have in both those towns, they definitely want to try and push things ahead. But ultimately, I keep going back to the cleared roadmap. You know, it's there's one file I have that I actually meet all the parking requirements. I meet all the setback requirements. But my density is beyond what the official plan will allow. And now there's a way for me to move forward through that if I add an affordability. But then when I ask, you know, how do you want me to go about adding the affordability? Well, I don't know. Like, okay, like, great. And so again, I think the more we can do to help just create the path for both the planner to go here and council to be on board. So it's not, well, what do we think of this or what do we think of that? Just a consensus of, if X, Y, Z exists, then we're going to let this go this way. And it's just being very concise and clear without ambiguity. It's got to be black and white. Yeah. Yeah. Great.
I'd like to start the next segment of our day on the affordable housing project financing. So we've had to actually swap places in our schedule just because one of our presenters has to leave early. So I'm going to introduce Jamie Shipley from CMHC. Jamie has over 30 years experience in the residential construction industry, including 30 years with CMHC. Jamie's role at CMHC includes promoting the creation of sustainable, affordable housing and delivering on the national housing strategy. Jamie shares the technical and social economic information about aging in place and affordable housing programs with builders, developers, and renovators, planners, and housing design professionals across Ontario. Jamie is also a member of our Ontario Association of Certified Engineering Technicians and Technologists. And if I could just have our AV crew please cue the next presentation. Sorry about the short notice. I apologize. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you. I guess I can, I'll just zoom through this. Maybe. No, maybe I won't. Oh, there, okay. Okay, great. Yeah, so thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm going to talk briefly in this short period of time about the programs that CMHC has available and make a few announcements. These are the programs that we have available under the continuum of housing solutions. And you'll notice SEED isn't up there. SEED is currently on hold because of the, we had a lot of applications on SEED and we ran out of money. So the good news is SEED is going to come back next year after April, and we're redesigning the program. So SEED will be back. Rapid House Initiative wrapped up. Round 3 is over. I'm going to just briefly talk about co-investment and the repair renewal. We do have a program for black-led housing organizations, if anyone knows of a black-led housing organization that would require money for development. The Rental Construction Finance Initiative, I'm not going to talk about that today, but that's really suited to developers. And then the Canada Greener Affordable Housing, I'll talk about that. It's a new program that's been announced. And over on the right-hand side, so on the left-hand side, that's programs that you'd be coming to CMHC and getting your money directly from the federal government. And on the right-hand side, that's our normal business. CMHC is a mortgage loan insurance company, and that's mortgage loan insurance. The Select, number one there, the Select, that replaced our MLI Flex, and it has affordable and energy efficient requirements on that. This is what we're looking for, the incentives for social outcomes, affordable, energy efficient, accessibility, proximity to amenities and partnerships, and then what you can earn by meeting those social outcomes are lower interest rates, low equity requirement, longer amortization, and a lower debt coverage ratio and longer terms. The terms are 2 10-year locked-in terms for a total of 20 years. These are the priority groups that that the National Housing Strategy programs target. So we're looking for projects that target these priority groups. And there's a lot of discussion around what's affordable, and these are the 3 parameters that CMHC has deemed affordable depending on what program you're looking for. So the National Co-Investment Program is probably our flagship one, and it benchmarks the median market rent of 80%. And then the MLI Select that was on the other side there, the benchmark there is the median renter household income. And the Rental Construction Finance Initiative, which I deem not as affordable, is 30% of the median household income for all families. So the median income for all families will be higher than the median income for renters. And that's the 3 programs that we focus, or the 3 benchmarks that we use. And then these are the minimum requirements for the National Co-Investment Fund. You'll see that we do require a partnership there to extend our money as long as we can. So we look for another investor on that, and you must have another form of government also support your project. So your municipality, for the most part, it'll be your municipality that will be supporting your project. On the affordable side, 30% of the units have rents at 80% of the median market income for a minimum of 20 years. These are the minimum standards. If anyone's worked with any of our programs, they'll know that it's a competitive process, and we do fund the best projects. That's the minimum to get through the door, so we do encourage you to go beyond that. A 25% reduction in energy use and greenhouse gas emissions, and 20% of the units must be accessible or the entire project designed to universal design. And then a new announcement that was just made last Friday, we did cut our contribution, or our forgivable loan or contribution on the COI, and we've ramped that back up again. If you exceed on affordability, so instead of 30% of the units, you have 40% of the units at 70% of median market rent, you can get an extra $25,000 per unit contribution. And if you increase the energy efficiency from 25%, that 25% uses the 2017 model energy code. If you go from 25 to 35, that ramps up another 25,000. So instead of 25,000, you can get up to $75,000 per unit. That's in contribution. These are the incentives that you would get if you did win. Low interest, like I said, your loan is with the federal government, so the interest rate will be lower. The loan to cost, you can go up to 95% and 75% on non-residential. Your project can have 30% non-residential or commercial, whatever, but 75, you can do up to 75% on the non-residential, amortization for 50 years, and then the debt coverage ratio of 1 and 1.4 for the non-residential part. The COI also has a program for existing buildings. The new construction is your 50-year amortization, and we call it revitalization of existing buildings. This would be for nonprofits and co-ops, up to 40% on that. So that's high level on the co-investment. I also wanted to take this time to introduce the Canadian Greener Affordable Housing Program that was just announced this year. Oops, I went too far there. These are the key highlights. It's a deep energy retrofit. So again, it's only targeted to community housing projects, and it's existing projects, and you're going to do a deep green. You have to reduce your energy consumption by 70%, and your greenhouse gas emissions by 80%. That's the minimum. They're called deep green for a reason. It's not just replacing windows and doors. It's looking at the building envelope, the mechanical systems, probably putting in an HRV because you're going to air tighten that building to get to 70% reduction. So you're going to need a heat recovery ventilator to bring in fresh air. It's a complete revamp of your project, but there is a high contribution rate you'll see that comes with that. Some of the benefits are improved building quality. The building will be better, the indoor air quality will be better, and the operating cost will be lower. So there's 2 streams to this program. There's a pre-retrofit funding, so like seed funding, but this is for people that are only interested in applying for the retrofit funding, and it'll pay for your consulting fees and stuff like that, and then you would then go for the retrofit funding. So these are the costs of the pre-retrofit. What is included? You must have a BCA, a building condition assessment report. It can't be more than 12 months old, can't be more than a year old. And that report would need to, even if you had one that was current, You still need to have the consultant look at it and give the remaining economic life of your project after you did the repairs. So you still have to revamp that. And then your energy audits and your energy modeling, your engineering, your construction cost estimates, all that can be included there. And then when you get to the retrofit funding, then that's basically, it's got to be energy related to what you're doing. And you can do a certain percentage of renewable energy as well to reduce your greenhouse gas to 80%. That doesn't reduce your energy profile. Your energy profile is your gigajoules. That's just you're spending your gigajoules with the sun or the wind, but you're not reducing that profile. So that renewable energy also will come into retrofit funding, climate resistant resources, and closing costs, all covered under that funding. And here's what it looks like. It's high in, like I said, it's high in contribution. Under the pre-retrofit, it's all contribution up to $130,000 per project. And then under the retrofit funding, we have $1.1 billion in loans, in a forgivable loan and a loan, and $85,000 per unit can be forgiven, or 80% of the cost of the project, whatever is less, is what you would qualify for. So it's high, the contribution is high because what we're looking for, we know is to get to 70%, it's deep, like it's going to cost money to do that. So that's the program I wanted to highlight that's new, and we'll do questions at the end, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate that. So now I'd like to call Chad Mehta and Jen Arntfield from FCM, the Green Municipal Fund. Chad Mehta is the advisor, programs and outreach for GFM's Sustainable Affordable Housing Initiative. He has over 15 years of experience in the affordable housing sector. He's an active member of CMHC's Expert Community on Housing's College of Reviewers and an advisory committee member to establish a National Black Community Technical Housing Resource Center. As an outreach advisor, Chad attracts and retains high-impact capital project opportunities to help strengthen Canada's affordable housing sector. Jen Arnfield is the Senior Manager of the Affordable Housing Development at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. She led the design of the Sustainable Affordable Housing Program offering and is now focused on the successful delivery and continuous improvement of the program, as well as other housing program opportunities at FCM. She previously led the affordable housing strategy, policy, and research for a municipal government.
We're sharing the presentation, so excuse it's one then the other, though. We won't go back and forth. Okay, well, thanks so much for having us. Thrilled to be here today. For those that don't know FCM, probably lots of you do, but we advocate to the federal government on behalf of municipalities, and we also deliver programming to communities. The Green Municipal Fund, or GMF, is our largest program. It drives local green innovation through training, resources, and funding. You can see a little bit of our impact on the slide, and I'll note this is now outdated because we released our new annual report this week, so do check that out. Check out our new numbers, and there's some great examples of sustainable affordable housing projects in there too. So the GMF has been around for over 20 years, but in 2019, the federal budget significantly expanded the work of the program through a $950 million investment in 3 new streams of programming focused on increasing energy efficiency in residences, large community buildings, and in affordable housing units. And so $300 million of that investment was for sustainable affordable housing. That's what we're talking about today. But before Chad tells you about our program, I just wanted to take a moment to quickly kind of ground us in why sustainability and talk about the intersection between housing and climate change. So first of all, buildings create GHG emissions, just kind of flat, and that leads to climate change. But of course, people need places to live. So we need to think about ways to kind of reduce those emissions, particularly as we're building new buildings that are going to be around for a while. So we need to think about kind of their operations and reducing those emissions. And the good news is that that also means cost savings and affordability. The second place that these pieces intersect is, of course, that people's housing situations either protect them or expose them to the impacts of climate change. And we'll just use the kind of extreme heat that we've been seeing recently as an example of that, and then kind of increased need for cooling in buildings as well. So also kind of worth mentioning, and kind of getting to what Jamie was speaking to as well, that the current stock of community housing actually does need addressing in this context too, where the majority of housing, about 3/4 of it, was built over 30 years ago and is fairly inefficient. So there's lots of opportunity there to kind of reduce costs, increase efficiency, and think about ways to increase comfort as well, perhaps with adding cooling in an affordable way. So we'll tell you about how we can support you in doing that. Pass it over to Chad.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So that's the context for the Sustainable Affordable Housing Initiative, and in terms of eligibility, we realized that traditionally the stewards of affordable housing weren't municipalities in some jurisdictions across the country, and we included nonprofits and housing co-ops as eligible applicants. So in order to be eligible for our funding, the lead applicant will need to be a municipality, a municipally owned corporation, a nonprofit housing provider, or a co-op housing provider. From an energy perspective, when we look at retrofit projects, we want to see a 25% energy reduction from baseline. And for new builds, we're looking to target net zero or net zero energy ready. Ideally, we're looking to be aggressive in reducing energy. So if a project achieves no more than 80 kilowatt hours per square meter, it will then meet our energy criteria for a new build. From an affordability perspective, the fund was designed to stack with CMHC's co-investment, so you will see that similar criteria in terms of 30% of the units need to be at or below 80% of the median market rent. Oh, got some missing information there. Starting with our planning grant. So we know, and we talked about this, or I heard about this today, the soft costs and pre-development work that has to happen before construction. So our planning grant can provide up to $25,000 to cover 80% of eligible costs. And this is where we can initiate that idea or engaging with the community and having consultations to understand what is the approach to achieve the environmental criteria of either 25% reduction or more, or what is the path towards net zero, which then can lead you to our study grant, where we can provide up to $175,000 to cover 50% of eligible costs. And this is where you can get support for design or detailed design. And I often tell clients that when you look at the requirements for CMHC co-investment or our funding specifically, include those required documents in your study application to support ultimately your business case, so that when you do approach implementation, you've thoroughly optimized the grants with us, and hopefully next year when CMHC seed funding gets online, you can access additional grant funding. But ultimately, we want to be producing, at this stage, high quality work to inform high impact projects. What you can't see for our pilot project is we can provide up to $500,000 to support 80% of eligible costs, and this is where we want to test a small scale of a particularly innovative concept or an idea, and I have a really great example that I'm going to share later on. Another way of implementing with SAW is with our capital funding. So our capital funding can provide up to $10 million. For retrofit specifically, it can cover up to 80% of eligible costs. And when we are looking at that 25% minimum energy reduction, that is tied to the grant portion. So if a project achieves 25%, we can award it up to $2.5 million in grant and $7.5 in loan. It works on a sliding scale, so if the project achieves 35, 40, 50%, energy reduction, we can reward it a 50% grant and a 50% loan. For new builds, it is up to $10 million, but here we're supporting a smaller percentage, so up to 20% of eligible costs. And the grant and loan portion are split, so 50% grant and 50% loan. We also, part of GMF's mandate is to share knowledge and build capacity in the sector to support the ultimate goal of what we want to achieve. And we have a capacity development department that works on great tools and resources. Our website has a lot of case studies that you can draw from, fact sheets. We have a resource library. I know GMF has a database that you can take a look at all of the projects that we've funded. We also have a new energy efficiency guide that can support providers in understanding some basic concepts around energy efficiency that can ultimately lead to scaling up one of your projects or understanding what needs to happen in order to achieve the 25% energy reduction. We also do training, so we have a new building operators training that you can take online for any staff working on any equipment. They can learn more about energy efficiency and ways to improve how they're already working. I often do this. I do presentations, I attend different events, I also participate in different webinars, but also our capacity development team organizes all of this work so that it can share that knowledge and use case examples to help groups like yourself. We also have a community of practice learning group where if you received a planning grant or a study grant, you're automatically included and you can work alongside peers to achieve ultimately the same goals. And lastly, we have partnered with the Community Housing Transformation Center, the Co-op Housing Federation of Canada, and BC Nonprofit Housing Association to launch a pilot of the Regional Energy Coach program where providers can get free coaching to support their projects. I definitely want to plug this project that we supported. I was chatting with Alex and Jackson, who led this project. Thanks to the Township of Augusta, this project is demonstrating to achieve more than, you can't show more than 100%, but it generates twice as much electricity than it consumes. It's a really innovative approach of affordable housing, and I wanted to use this example because I thought it could represent what affordable housing could look like in more of a rural context and not what we've seen so far of the MURBs. So part of all of this, I think, is relationship building. Makes my job a lot easier when I can understand what it is that you need in order to get to the support that could lead to the funding decision that you're looking for. So please, if you don't have my card, if you don't have my contact information, please reach out. Happy to connect with you and understand what the next step is.
I'd like to introduce Bernadette Chung from Infrastructure Ontario. Bernadette is the Vice President of Loan Operations and Customer Relations with Infrastructure Ontario Loan Program. Prior to this role, Bernadette has supported the loans program since 2011 as a member of Infrastructure Ontario's in-house legal team. Prior to moving to an in-house position, Bernadette worked in private practice in a litigation boutique in Toronto, representing financial institutions, banks, and professional liability insurers.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Caroline, and I must say I'm so happy to be here to meet with so many of our existing borrowers and to connect with so many other potential partners as we strive to move forward with the Affordable Housing Initiative. So I feel like Infrastructure Ontario has been referred to a number of times today, but we have yet to be formally introduced, which is fine. I was planning to spend the next 8 minutes, I've been given 8 minutes, to formally introduce the IO Loans Program. You may have heard of IO. We are active all throughout the province. We do a number of different things. We manage all of the real estate portfolio for the Government of Ontario. We manage all of the big major P3 projects throughout the province of Ontario. We manage all the leases for government buildings in the province of Ontario. But somewhere in all of that big ticket stuff is this little group, and we're the loans program. So we have been around since 2003. We started off with a focus strictly on lending to municipalities to support their capital financial needs, or municipal works. And then around 2006, the government of Ontario thought it appropriate that it expand our parameters of eligible borrowers to whom we can lend to include not-for-profit housing providers, as well as certain other broader public sector organizations. So what is the purpose of IO's loans program? Since inception in 2003, the purpose of this loans program has been to provide low-interest financing to eligible borrowers. Affordable housing is a pretty intractable problem. There's probably multiple reasons as to why we're facing this crisis that we are facing today. I'm not here to give you a golden ticket. I'm not here to give you a single solution to the problem, but I am here to give you potential support on one aspect of that problem, and it's the cost of financing your affordable housing project. So I decided to start off with this slide. This shows our average indicative interest rates for what we call our primary sector borrowers. That's the line on the bottom. And our secondary sector borrowers. All municipalities are considered to be primary sector borrowers. And if you are a municipality looking to borrow from us, all of you will benefit from the same interest rate, regardless of whether you're the City of Toronto or Leeds and Grenville. Not-for-profit affordable housing providers fall into our secondary tier bucket. We charge slightly more in interest to not-for-profit affordable housing providers, and that's what the line at the top indicates as the average interest rates that would have been applicable to the sector. And so what this shows you is the rising interest rates. It starts off in October 2020. It ends in November 2022. I had my Treasury guy put this together for me. He wasn't around by the time I needed to submit this, so I couldn't extend it out to 2023. But you can see the trend. Over a 2-year period, you had an incredible rise in interest rates. Interest rates basically doubled, or not doubled, but the cost of borrowing doubled. What that means for you as a borrower looking to leverage financing from us or any other lender to build an affordable housing project is that your total principal and interest payments over a 25-year term loan would have increased by about 40%. And this is where the IO loans program can potentially help you. Like I said, we've been established since 2003. We provide financing for infrastructure projects only, and really new infrastructure projects is where the government wants us to focus on, to a number of public sector organizations. Eligibility is established through our act. All municipalities, if you're an incorporated municipality, you are eligible to borrow from us for your municipal capital needs. We are also authorized to lend to certain not-for-profit affordable housing projects, providers for certain projects. And I say that because our legislation has very specific criteria that must be met for a not-for-profit affordable housing provider to borrow from us. For example, you have to be not-for-profit. You have to be providing housing under a government housing program. So for example, the co-investment fund, if you're getting a contribution grant from the co-investment fund or from the federal IAH fund, that would be considered to be a government housing program. If you're providing affordable housing in partnership with the municipality, that can also fit that criteria of providing housing under a government housing program. And we also have certain criteria as to what sort of projects constitute affordable housing. And we're continuing to have discussions about that. It used to be, generally speaking, minimum 70% of your units had to meet maximum of 80% of average area rents in order for your project to be considered to be an affordable housing project to qualify for a program. We are continuing to have discussions about that because we understand that that can be a challenging threshold for not-for-profit affordable housing providers to meet. And then what does this mean for you? Well, we provide 2 different facilities, or credit facilities, that may be most applicable for the sector, a construction facility and a term facility. And the biggest difference or benefit to you as a potential borrower from partnering with the IO Loans Program is that we are able to basically leverage the province of Ontario's credit rating. And we basically lend out our loans at a cost of borrowing that is very, very similar to the cost of borrowing for the province of Ontario, which is currently rated as a double A by, I think, S&P. So in addition to the interest rates, there are some other benefits that we can pass on to you as a potential borrower. Unlike commercial lenders, we do not charge any upfront or structuring fees. Sometimes this is called the underwriting fee. Sometimes it's a flat rate or it's a percentage of the total amount that you'd be seeking to borrow from a commercial lender. We also do not charge any standby fees. So for example, if you are approved for a loan with us, you sign an agreement with us on March 1st of this year, but you do not plan to do any drawdowns until, let's say, November of this year. Many other lenders will charge you a fee for that period of time between March and November for which you do not draw down on their loans because they are incurring costs to have those loans available for you. We do not charge that. Our construction financing facility is available for a period of up to 5 years. It's really project dependent. We do want the construction facility to be converted to a term loan or a mortgage financing with a fixed interest rate within a certain period of time after reaching substantial completion on the project. But the max amount of time that you have to complete the project can be as long as 5 years. During construction phase, like with many other commercial lenders, you only have to pay the interest on the accrued principal amount that you draw down. We do charge a variable interest rate during construction. It resets at the beginning of each month. Whatever the applicable interest rate would be at the latest drawdown would be what you would be paying on the overall amount. You can pay down any portion, even all of it, of the construction loan amount that you've taken down to finance the construction phase of your project before you're required to convert that into a fixed interest rate loan. We have fixed rates, very low fixed interest rates, for up to 30 years amortization and term upon project completion. It's 25 if you're not for affordable housing provider, 30 if you're a municipality. And then I really wanted to focus on this next bullet here for the rest of my presentation. There are different ways in which you can leverage the IO financing or lending option to potentially meet the needs of a particular project. And it really depends on who the borrower is. So we can lend to municipalities, we can lend to not-for-profit affordable housing providers as standalone borrowers. But I think one of the themes that I'm hearing from today's presentations is the importance of partnership. And I do want to emphasize that about how that can also be leveraged to really maximize the benefits of the IO Loans Program to support the development of affordable housing projects. So there's basically 3 different buckets, 3 different pathways available to finance an affordable housing project using the IO Loans Program. I'm going to go kind of out of order from, well, actually, no, I'm going to keep it to that order of the bullets below. First option, probably the most complex option, is where the not-for-profit affordable housing provider is a standalone entity, borrows the funds directly from IO. In that case, we're going to structure the loan very much like a project financing project. You will need to securitize the project. IO will need a first-ranking mortgage, assignment of rents, first-ranking project-specific GSA. We're going to have to get some legal folks involved. That's going to have some transaction costs. We're likely going to need title insurance. You're going to have to pay some title insurance premiums. And you get charged a secondary tier interest rate. So that can be a fairly long period, negotiating all the documents, securitizing it, putting the title insurance into place. Once your project goes into operation, during the operations phase, we will also need annual reporting. It's not terrible. It's not terrible. We just want to see how your project is performing year after year. So at minimum, it's going to require submission of your audited financial statements. How are you doing on your rents? Are you keeping up with your CapEx funding requirements? So that's probably the most complex way in which we can get a project funded for you through the IO Loans Program. Second option is where the partnership comes in. It's It's a scenario where the not-for-profit affordable housing provider borrows from IO, so again, they're the primary borrower, but we've got a municipal partner as a guarantor. So the municipal partner comes in and says, we think that this is a project that will benefit the community. We think that this is a project where we want to have skin in the game. And so we will provide a guarantee. So we'll securitize the project. And there will be an additional financing document that's going to be the guarantee from the municipal partner. Well, you're like, I'm not seeing a benefit right now. The benefit is this. The benefit comes in at the pricing stage. If a municipal partner comes in to a project to support an affordable housing project as a guarantor, we will provide that project with a primary sector interest rate. That can be a savings of up to 30 BPS. Just to give you an indication of what our rates look like, as of Wednesday morning, a 25-year fixed interest amortizing term loan available for municipalities, we're offering a 5.34%. As of Wednesday, the secondary tier secondary tier interest rate, so this would be the interest rate applicable to not-for-profit affordable housing providers when a 25-year loan is sitting at 5.64. So you'd be looking at a savings of 30 BPS with the second financing option. Continuing on the theme of partnerships, if you're able to get into an even more integrated partnership model between the affordable housing provider and the municipality, there can be a further cost savings available on that particular project. So the third bullet contemplates a scenario where you as a not-for-profit affordable housing provider may approach a municipality and say, we have a project. It's going to do this. It's going to have all of these benefits to this particular municipality. Municipality may agree to borrow for that project. Now, the project is going to be operated and owned by the not-for-profit housing provider, but the municipality comes in, borrows from IO as the borrower. Maybe that municipality will then turn around, take those funds from IO, provide it as a grant to the not-for-profit affordable housing provider. Maybe they'll turn around and take that funds and tack on a little bit of an interest and lend that out to the affordable housing provider. But what that third option provides is we don't have to securitize the project. So you're going to save all of those transaction costs. We're not going to require annual reporting from you once that project goes into operations. So you don't have to worry about that either. And on top of that, we'll give you the financing based on the primary tier interest rate. So you benefit from lower cost of interest throughout the project. So something to think about. And I see Caroline giving me the eye. I see you. So that's really what I wanted to focus on as part of our formal introduction today. There is a slide deck. I understand it's available online. I thought I would also attach a project to-do list, things that you will want to talk to IO about if you have a project that you would like us to consider funding. These are things where we will want to see alignment. We will want to get further information and get a better understanding from you. Also just good checklist to have. So thank you so much for your time. I'm going to end off on some examples. There's some other examples available on our website. And if you have any questions, we welcome any questions and outreach to any of our customer relations managers and myself. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much for that, Bernadette. So unfortunately, Jamie from CMHC had to leave early. He had to catch a flight. But if there were any questions for him, please send them to us, and we can certainly forward them on. For the other presenters, if you have any questions, please feel free to come up to the microphone, and we can take a couple of questions.
I'm aware of the funding on the non-for-profit side, obviously working at CADCO, but putting my private developer hat on, I'm going, where's the money for me? And there really isn't any, and I'm wondering what's being done. I think we maybe get one of your grants for FCM, I think the $25,000 one, and unfortunately Jamie's leaving, but we also need to get funding. Private developers really do help create this housing, and I would love comments from both FCM and infrastructure on that, because I think it's something that we need more of, even if it's just on the planning side, like I've spoken to. But we're definitely being looked over, and I think we're part of the solution.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that question. For us specifically, it's very funny to say $300 million isn't a lot of money, but it isn't. Not in the context of the need. We could probably spend it in this county alone with the housing need that's there. So we had to be quite kind of targeted on our objectives, and we focused in on affordability and specifically kind of non-market housing. And so basically, private developers are not eligible for even the planning, any of our funding. That being said, private developers are often involved. There's not many CADCOs around the country where you actually have a not-for-profit developer doing the development for a nonprofit operator. So we certainly have a lot of projects where, a nonprofit housing provider, works with private architects and private construction and all of that kind of stuff. So that's our intersection. Basically, we just had to prioritize with limited resources. But I'll pass it over to Bernadette.
That really is a great question, and also I really loved your presentation. Thank you so much. I'm going to speak with two voices. One, my civil servant voice, and maybe the other with my non-civil servant voice. As a civil servant, I will say that's a policy issue. The policies as they currently are constructed are probably based on models that were prevalent before the pandemic, definitely. Maybe need a little bit of rethinking. I would say it's, as Minister Kalandra said this morning, I think there's a lot more appetite within government to look at more innovative out-of-the-box solutions. I would encourage you to go and speak with various decision makers at all levels of government on that issue. There are some issues about how do you ensure the public money is being spent, blah, 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 blah. I don't think that they're intractable issues. That's me, the non-civil servant, talking. So I would say, it's got to be part of the conversation, and we need to hear from people like you to really put that onto folks' radar.
I think we have time for one more question, if anyone has one more for the presenters.
Mayor John Beddoes of Gananoque. And it's a point for consideration for this group because we're talking about financing and money, and really it does all boil down to the affordability of the build phase, which is about land affordability, and financing is a key element of all of that. But I want to point out a gap in all of this that's been discussed today. Every point discussed in affordability has been about rental and not about affordable purchase to own. The Green Fund is about rental, the Infrastructure Ontario Fund is about creating rentals, and every point raised on the floor here is about the rental piece. But when we talk about affordability, a key component of that is not just about rent geared to income, which is separate from affordable. Affordable is something people can afford to pay for completely out of their own income. And nowhere on the floor today, to throw it out there, has anyone talked about the starter home build. It's the missing middle. And there doesn't seem to be any program, any funding initiative to encourage industry to do this. All of the funding for municipalities or not-for-profits is aimed at rental. But there's nowhere is anyone talking about the build of starter homes to allow people of modest means but good credit rating to move into the housing market and build that stock of personal wealth over time that takes you from, that allows you to buy the education in the future, plan for your own retirement. And I'm throwing it out there as a question, I suppose, and a challenge for this group, because you're in the financing wing. Is anyone talking about financing affordable to build? And I understand completely that the commodification on resale becomes a challenge in maintaining affordability to own. But is anyone talking about large-scale starter homes? Thank you.
Yeah, I can take that one. Great question, great comment too. One model that I'm seeing is this rent-to-own model, And while that model isn't eligible for our fund, businesses are curious to know more about, I think I also heard in the room, how do we attract workforce labor into our communities in order to drive business? So that has been a conversation that's popped up in different projects, but it's a model that is very interesting because I think when you get grants involved and public funds involved, folks are aware how these projects are going to get funded. So yeah, there's maybe an optics in terms of the affordability piece. How do you enter the rental market to then enter the home ownership piece? So it's a great comment. It's not a full stop solution because in the continuum of housing, you are going to see gaps across the board, not just in home ownership, but I think someone presented a slide today, it was 42% or 45% rentals in and around Brockville. So I think a lot of the policy is speaking to some of the data that we're seeing in terms of where can we make the most impact and where is affordability. And right now, I don't think you see affordability in home ownership per se, but is there potential for affordability in rental? I think this is where we're working towards that.
I'll counter that with the idea that the average rent paid in Leeds and Grenville right now is about $1,400, if I remember the last slide. And I know what kind of mortgage that carries at 5%, right? So now we're in the $300,000 range. So the balance is if somebody can afford to pay $1,400, they could purchase a starter home that was built into that price range. The challenge is no one is building for not the bottom quarter of the market, but for the second quarter of the market. All the new build from industries in the top half of the market. And so how do we crack that space? Because if you can afford $1,400 in rent, you can afford a mortgage on a modest home.
Jamie's gone, but I do think that CMHC has an affordable home ownership program that's part of the Innovation Fund. I couldn't speak to the uptake or the parameters of it or anything like that, but you asked who's involved. I do think there's like a small CMHC program that's looking at it, if that's helpful.
But there's no build, and that's the point I'm making. So if there's no supply, the program is an orphan program.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a great issue to raise. Thank you very much, Mayor Beddoes. I think that's all the time we have for our questions today on this segment, but please, if anyone has any afterwards, please send them to us and we'll certainly connect you with our financiers. Thank you very much.
Next, I'd like to invite to the stage Joe Gallivan. Joe Gallivan is the Director of Planning and Economic Development for Frontenac County and a member of the County Planning Directors of Ontario and has been in that position since 2009. He has over 35 years' experience in planning with municipal, regional, and provincial governments in both Nova Scotia and Ontario. Joe has a master's degree in urban and regional planning from Dalhousie University. Welcome, Joe.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Joe Gallivan. I want to thank Carolyn for inviting me to come here today. I met Carolyn on the phone back in the spring on a cold call. She called me and said, I was just talking to Newterra, who is a builder of communal wastewater systems, and I was talking to them about affordable housing, and Brad at Newterra said, you should call Joe at Frontenac because they're up to something that could make a difference. And then subsequently, Carolyn said, Joe, can you come to the United Counties and speak to us? So my CAO, Kelly Pender, and I were in front of your county council in July. I appreciated that. And to Warden Peckford and the members of the county council, some of the things I'm going to say in the next 20 minutes you've already heard, but we've taken another step forward since July. So then she said, can you think about coming to this symposium because there's going to be developers there. There's going to be other people outside Leeds and Grenville that may have an interest in what Frontenac's doing, and we think they'd like to hear from you. So I want to thank you very much for having us today, and I hope you find what I have to say of interest to you. So the first three things I want to say to you. First of all, the thing about communal, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about it, it's great for rural communities because it's a local alternative to having to put full municipal services in. And it's scalable, which is great for small rural communities. Secondly, what I'm going to talk to you about is not rocket science. It's doable. And it can be, the other piece is that what we've done, this model we've put together, is easily transferable to other jurisdictions. So it can work pretty much anywhere in regional Eastern Ontario. So I'll talk about why we're doing this. I want to talk to you about 2 projects we've been working on that are going to be dependent on communal services that will have an affordable housing component. Talk to you about what we consider the game changer, the establishment of a public utility across our region that will take over all of these systems in the future that are going to be put in the ground. They won't be privately managed. And then where we are at Frontenac. So why are we doing this? Because in Frontenac County, we don't have a lot of options. None of our villages and hamlets in Frontenac County have water and sewer. And nor will they ever have water and sewer because of the cost. I mean, we're similar to many of the townships you're from. Our townships don't have the fiscal capacity to make that kind of investment. So that's not going to happen. But in our villages, they are historic. They're really important to our culture and our communities. They're where the churches are, the pharmacies are, the medical centers are. But a lot of the building lots, very similar to other communities, they're very small. They're all on well and septic. They're also those villages where we've put a lot of public investment in, and they have almost all of our non-residential assessments, so they're really important. So here's the stumbling block of why this is not happening a lot in Ontario. The provincial government requires anybody who's going to build on communal water and wastewater systems, and they're traditionally privately built and privately run, out of good public service, they require each municipality to enter into something called a municipal responsibility agreement. Essentially, that is a contract that's entered into between the municipality and the builder for safeguarding. So if the builder goes bankrupt or the system fails, it's up to the municipality to take it over and fix it. It makes a lot of sense. However, what happens in many situations, again with these small municipalities with limited fiscal capacity, may be a good idea. It may be a mix of housing. It may be good planning. But at the end of the day, council will say to the developer, okay, you're going to put $1 million of infrastructure in the ground. We're going to need you to write us another check for $1 million that we can put in a reserve fund as safeguarding. And that's when the business model collapses. And you know, I've seen this happen in other parts of Ontario where the developer is very enthusiastic and then they get to the final piece and they walk away. So we figured a way to get around this. And the reason we're doing this is a simple statement out of our county official plan from 2016. The lack of municipal services in our villages challenges future community viability. So as a planner and all the planners who work for you, we don't just think a year ahead. We're thinking a generation ahead. We're thinking 50 years ahead. And to me, status quo in Frontenac, where were we going to be in 50 years from now or 100 years from now if we kept building everything on a well and a septic? There's no business park in Frontenac right now because a developer won't come and install a giant septic or a well. It's just not financially feasible. There's limited commercial opportunities in Frontenac because it's standard well and septic. There is no mixed housing in Frontenac because it's standard well and septic. There's no opportunity to have affordable housing in Frontenac because of the well and septic. This is just a little cartoon. I don't want to get into exactly what communal services are. I know it's relatively new terminology. The technology is not new, but there's the 3 different types of servicing that the Ontario Provincial Policy Statement supports. Number 1 is your traditional municipal system with the big water plant, the big sewage plant, very expensive to put in the ground. You're also kind of guessing into the future of how much demand you're going to need. You have to put those big pipes in the ground at the start, or you may have a problem down the road. And then at the top, your standard well and septic, which just think a septic today goes for about $40,000 for a residential lot, depending if you're on the shield or off the shield. And then the communal system is essentially one water source, whether it's coming from a lake or a water body or an aquifer, and one sewage treatment system for a number of residential units. And it is very scalable. And to simplify it for you, these systems are like Lego blocks. And that's, again, a good thing for rural communities, because you can start with 10 units, and it can be phased over time, and the box can be added to take on more capacity. And in one of the communities I'm going to show you, they're having a debate right now. If they put communal in on this one site, should they put a bigger box in so they can service other parts of the village? So there's some really good positive things for rural community building here. So again, and I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because you've got my slides, and I'll be happy to talk later, but definitely better environmental advantages. You think about it, you're tapping into one aquifer for this development. You're not drilling 30 holes in the ground for 30 units. You're looking at one. We have one property in Frontenac where this developer built 13 rural estate lots, but he had a giant piece of land, and he tested other parts of his land, and he hit an aquifer that could service 400 standard single detached homes. But it's not part of the settlement area, so we can't build there. But imagine if you found something like that, you know, and in Frontenac County, part of our lands are on fractured limestone, so it can be hit and miss in terms of finding wells. But one well, always maintained and managed, can be a real positive thing. And then the community planning advantages. You can look at developing rural residential subdivisions around your villages that will knit in to the existing village. They'll be walkable. The kids can walk to school. Pathways connecting into the main street. We can't do that in Frontenac right now. All of our rural estate lots are 1.5 to 2 acres in size, and they're isolated. This gives us an opportunity to build our communities better. Again, keeping our schools open, grocery stores open, and I've already talked about walkable communities. So we started this project about 7 years ago based on our county official plan. I can tell you if you want to do this in the future, it won't take you 7 years. It's just that we had to think about what we were doing. We had to think it through because no one had done this before. And there was a lot of politics involved. And that's fine. That's having conversations and not being necessarily an advocate, but explaining why this may be a good thing for the future of your community. You have to have those conversations. You have them with the politicians. You have them with provincial. I've been in front of Mr. Clark a number of times at AMO. You have to have these conversations to say, we're trying to do something different, and we need your help. So we started the work in 2018. We had a consulting firm of planners and engineers. And essentially, what they said was, the obstacles that you think are in front of you are just perceptions. So most planners, quite frankly, don't know much about communal services. Our planning institute, the Ontario Professional Planners Institute, I'm going to say this, is urban focused. Or they are interested in preserving prime ag land, but they don't think long and hard about how do we keep our rural communities thriving. They just don't do that. So I think I'm one of the first planners who's really thought about how do we look at a different form of servicing that will keep these communities going. And I go to this conference every year in Huntsville. It's the Ontario On-Site Wastewater Association. It's a bunch of engineers. I'm the only planner there. But I've met all these people who build these systems. I've met the engineers who install them, and I've learned that this technology is not unique. It's not new. It's been around for 30 years. It's just hard to put it in the ground in Ontario because of that municipal responsibility agreement. So I'm hoping other planners will now catch on to this and maybe think about this as well. Just quickly want to show you an example. This is a community about 10 minutes from downtown Kingston in South Frontenac Township. Brad Wright, Director of Planning's here. Brad, good to have you. A real-life example, we asked the consultants to take a real-life example and show the political decision makers what communal services can do. So, Inverary, this is a subdivision that we approved in 2013. It's a 69-acre parcel, 28 hectares. And we said to them, can you take this piece of land, engineer it on communal, and just show what you could have instead of what was approved, which was 16 single detached, about 2.5 units per acre. So I know it's hard to see, but this is on our website. You can take a good look at it. This is a brochure we gave to the politicians. So on the left is the approved development. On the right, what the engineers and planners came up with. Instead of 16 detached singles, you've got 41 singles, 9 townhouse lots, so that's 62 units instead of 16, an apartment complex, as well as a commercial area and a passive park, which is where the septic field would be. This was an eye-opener about what we could do, and it went a long way to advancing where we are now. You may be familiar with Nuterra if you're from Leeds and Grenville. They're in Brockville. I've met these gentlemen through the conference I go to. Brad Gaffney, really good guy. He's one of the people I understand. Some of you municipal politicians and some developers have been in this facility. It's 450,000 square feet. They're building these systems and they're taking them all over the world. This box here, which is the size of a sea can, they call the R108, which means that box can service 108 residential units. And here's a typical install. This was one they put up in the Muskokas for a Marriott development, so they use it for multiple uses. Brad was kind enough to let me take my county council down there in May, and they took a walking tour. They saw one of these boxes that was being sent to Ethiopia, another one was being built for France, another one was going to the far north, so they're going everywhere in the world. And the other thing that they learned was inside that box, most of the plastic parts of that system you can buy at Home Depot. It's only the end of the system where they have the technology to treat the wastewater. So the parts aren't expensive. It's not going to be hard to manage these systems and operate them once they become part of our public utility. And Nuterra is just one of the organizations, but we went there because they're in Brockville and because they've built these systems for a while. But definitely worth the trip. And this is just a slide to illustrate. This is where they put them in all over the world. Look at the United States, where the federal government has been supporting communal or decentralized systems for decades. Nuterra has put less than 30 of these in Ontario. Again, it's because of the legislation and the hurdles. It's just been very, very difficult. So 2 projects I want to talk to you about that we've been working on in our counties, knowing that we've been progressing at the regional level. Just quickly, that was last week's Globe and Mail. We've already talked about this. You heard the minister this morning say he's also going to take the provincial tax off. Early comments that are coming in from to our Warden's Caucus are saying that this is going to help. It may not be the best thing, but it's going to help get rental housing going. And we have no rental market. We have no rental units at all in Frontenac. And so there is a demand for us to have rental units because we are a low-income community. We can't afford a mortgage for $300,000. A lot of people can't afford that. So the first one is in Sharbot Lake. Sharbot Lake is about 30 minutes west on 7, west from Perth. And this is the village. It's a beautiful village if you've never been there. East and west basin of the lake on either side. The yellow area is the school, a former school site that the township bought in 2016. They tore down the school. It had asbestos in it. They cleared the site. It's empty right now. And originally, they were going to put seniors housing there, use the existing well and septic, a total of 8 units. But I was talking with the mayor and I was talking with the CAO and said, you know what we're doing at the regional level? We're trying to promote communal. Can you pause on this and let us see what we can do? And thanks to the Green Municipal Fund, we got 50% funding to do a feasibility study. So instead of 8 units, we just finished this study late last year. Potential for 2 3-story apartment buildings, up to 50 units. We'll use the lake to take the surface water from the lake for treatment, and it'll go back into the lake. The engineers tell me when it comes out the end of the pipe, the wastewater treatment, you can drink it, but I can't get them to say that in public. But supposedly that's true. It's a very advanced treatment system. And then the other thing they wanted to do was not only service this site, but they were looking at whatever they put in the ground, they'd like to hook up to the community hall. Potentially some of the churches will have a lot of community functions. And even a broader community discussion is, should we look about putting this in other parts of the village? Because that village, I learned from a resident back in the 1980s, MOE came in there and they provided 50% funding to replace every single septic system in the village because they were all deteriorating. But that's 40 years ago. So where are we right now with that? Well, that's the 3D modeling that the consultants did for us, just to give people a picture to have the community discussion. One of the controversies on this property is that they've let the Pickleball Association use half of it. We had a meeting. We're out talking to the public again. We had a meeting with the pickleball people. 37 of them came out in force. And they only agreed to meet us at 3 o'clock because they were playing pickleball from 12 to 2. But I think they understand what we're trying to do. And just recently, a week ago Monday, we had a community meeting. Small village, there's 40 people at that meeting, facilitated. We had aerial photos of the site, and we said, what do you want to see on it? Because we're going to go to the next stage, which is the zoning. We put a survey online. We've had over 800 responses. Charlotte Lake is a community hub. People want to keep the grocery store open. They want to keep the medical center open. They're very interested in making sure it's viable. That site is a 1-minute walk to the grocery store, 1-minute walk to the drugstore, 3-minute walk to the medical center. They see the value of it. It's more about the zoning and the types of uses. So the end game here is we're going to come back to them and say, here's what we've heard. We want to put the zoning in place before you decide to sell it or private partnership, but we want some certainty on the ground for a prospective builder for you. So that's going to happen. And then the village of Verona is in South Frontenac Township. The majority of South Frontenac is in the commuter shed of Kingston, and 3 out of 4 people who work and live in South Frontenac commute into the city every day. Huge growth demand there. So they started a master plan for housing in the village 2021. It's a small village. They've had a lot of public output. So they did a concept design, township-owned land again along the main street, looking at up to 120 units, only on communal, and that's what the study says. There's a snapshot so they're looking at different housing types, potential apartments, townhouses, and another topology link, but that's all online. If you type Verona, Engage Frontenac Verona, you'll find that. So again, they said it's going to provide mixed housing. We need seniors housing, and communal services will be necessary for this to happen. I'm not going to talk about that. It's just you can see the slide. There's value for the county as a whole. There's a value for developers because they can come anywhere in Frontenac and build these systems, and we'll be ready to help them. And then it works for residents because we're going to have long-term stable communities, hopefully in the future. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about this utility. Now, this is usually where my CAO speaks, but obviously he's not here, so I'm not a finance guy, but I'll try to talk you through it. This is the game changer for us. This was the hardest part in terms of having the political conversations and getting the buy-in from all 4 townships and our county council. It started in 2021, and we were very smart, I have to say, is when we set up this governance committee, we decided that the 4 mayors of the 4 townships would sit on that committee. And we also had 4 experts, land use, development, engineering, governance, sit with them, 4 citizens. And we as county staff stood away. We didn't want any interpretation that this was a county plan. It wasn't. And we had the consultants work directly with them. So they looked at what is the best way to set up a public utility to manage these systems. And it's what's called a municipal service corporation. This is permitted under the Municipal Act. There's probably more of them than you would know. In Kingston, Utilities Kingston, the public utility that manages gas, water, and sewer, is a municipal service corporation. There's a company in Muskoka called Lakeland Holdings. They manage all the hydro dams, and they do solar. They do fiber optic. They'll put fiber optic in the ground where private sector won't go. It's a municipal service corporation. And it is an arm's length from the political side. So where we're heading is we're going to set up, there'll be a holding company and an operating company. The holding company will be the board of directors. The board of directors will be one councillor from each of the 4 townships. So the operating company will report to them. The holding company, the shareholder value will be based on the assessment on the ground in each township at the date of incorporation. So we have one township, South Frontenac, that has more than 50%, but they won't be able to dominate the board. They're going to need one vote at least on their side to do it. But I can tell you that the 4 townships have really pulled together on this, really come together on this, so I don't think there's going to be any problem. The operating company will be professionals, professional engineers, CEOs, whatever. Now, one of the questions I get asked is, how are you going to staff this at the beginning? And we're not going to, or the corporation won't. They'll have to hire a CEO out of the gate, but very likely the first 5 to 10 years as we start to put this in the ground, we'll contract out to the City of Kingston or the Town of Perth or the Clean Water Agency to manage and maintain these systems early days. Again, the benefits is it's publicly owned. And again, one of the major reasons we all agreed on this is that the utility will be municipally owned, and every one of these systems will be publicly operated and managed. We have a councillor in North Frontenac Township who just retired from York Region, where he ran a $300 million water system for the entire region. And he said to me, these don't work when they're in private sector hands, sometimes because you have to maintain them all the time, but that's not going to be an issue. There's a comfort level with the community and with our decision makers that they'll be operated, managed, and installed. For developers, you come to Frontenac, you follow whatever the planning rules are for the 4 townships, and you put the systems in the ground, and once they're in the ground, you turn the keys over to the utility. You don't have to worry about what the uptake's going to be. The utility will charge rates. They will have meters on properties. And again, I've had the good fortune of talking to a lot of these companies, and they've told me they expect the average utility bill for water and sewer to be between $120 and $150 a month. And if you take the cost of putting a septic and a well in over a 25-year period, it's a fairly comparable thing. But the homeowner never has to worry about the water quality. They never have to worry about their septic inspections. It's all taken care of, so there's that benefit as well. And this is Kelly, my CAO's analogy. It's like vehicle insurance. If you have to insure your car on your own, you're only going to need $5 million in the bank. If you insure 1 million cars, then it's a lot cheaper to have car insurance. And it's same for our communal services. Right now, under the municipal responsibility agreement, each municipality is on the hook for the risk. That will not be the case. The utility will be taking care of these systems, so the political worry about what if these go down is not going to be a problem. And as more are built through our region, the risk becomes less and less. I'm not going to read all this. It's on the website or on my page, but the other thing I just want to emphasize, number 4, we've made it clear to the townships, you will decide where you want these to go and at what scale. The utility will not do that. That's up to you in talking to your community. So where are we now? All 4 townships and the county have agreed to pull in together to create the utility. We are currently working with a law firm to incorporate the utility. We will have this up and running before the end of this year. Last week at our county council, they passed a resolution to ask each of the 4 townships before our next county council meeting in October to select one council member, doesn't have to be the mayor, to be on the board of directors. We're also setting up a technical advisory committee of experts, so I've been reaching out to other planners and developers and engineers to consider to join this committee, and what they're going to do is basically develop a guidebook. So when it's time to create that operating company, they can hand something to them. So for example, as a best practice, how many different types of these systems do we want in the ground in Frontenac? Because there's a whole bunch of different ones. I showed you Nuterra, but there's other ones. And probably 3 or 4. So they would say, we have vetted 3 or 4 of these systems. If you come and build in Frontenac, you put these in the ground, it's going to be a quicker approval. I'm also taking an official plan amendment to the county plan forward. We have a public meeting next week. And essentially that's going to plant the flag that communal services are a preferred form of servicing in the county, but it's also going to trigger official plan amendments of the 4 municipalities, because we want them to have the conversation about where do you want these to go and at what scale. So again, instead of Frontenac, there's going to be a lot of development pressure. I'd like them to talk about, if you want to put these in rural areas, at what scale? Because the concern is somebody could show up with a 200-acre parcel of land and say, I want to put 150 units on here. Does that really fit into the rural community? So that's something that they're going to have to talk about. So that's the website that I highly recommend you go to. It's got all of the studies I've talked about. There's a video on there of a presentation that we did to County Council last year about what this is all about. There's a frequently asked questions section, lots of information. And just a couple other quick things. Number one is we still have another hurdle to get through, and that's on the environmental approval side of things. For any of these systems, you have to go through a class environmental assessment, and that's understandable. If you are within a conservation authority district and you've got a source protection plan, you also need an amendment to that plan. So even though Nuterra, for example, has got approval from the province that they're saying this is a good, safe system, every time we go to put one in the ground, we're going to have to go through the same process. Every single time, it's going to take probably over 2 years. And we're going to have MOE on one side looking at the approval. On the other side, we're going to have a committee from the Conservation Authority looking at the same thing, but it's another approval. And it makes no sense to me, I have to say, especially if these are going to be taken over by a municipal public utility and guaranteed management. We've met with the Minister of the Environment. He's opened a conversation. We've had conversations with minister staff. They've been very cordial, but they've been completely unhelpful. They work in a box, and quite frankly, they're in Toronto. They have no idea about what rural land use is all about. It's frustrating, let me tell you. But we're going to go at it again. I'm working with some engineers who understand the legislation, and our warden is going to meet with the minister again and deliver him a package and say, here's the legislation you need to amend. If you agree that communal servicing is a good thing for rural Ontario, then change the legislation. If it's a public utility, give them a different approval process that is quicker. You want to build a lot of housing, as your premier says, this will help. It'll help with different mixed housing, but your approval system is from the 70s, it's out of date, it doesn't reflect public ownership, and I don't know what's going to happen. But I have to give credit to my county council, who over the last 6 or 7 years have really, they're advocates for this now. They see the value to their communities. You know, planners don't have any power, we just advise. But the decision makers have realized this is the only way we can go forward. The other comment would be that, and I've had this question, can this model be used elsewhere? Can it go into other jurisdictions? Yes. We've even had questions of, can we join your utility if we're neighbors? The answer is yes. It could be spread as far as possible. But my CAO has cautioned and said, can you just let us get our feet on the ground? And let us know. And if you, right now, let's say when we incorporate, each share is going to be a dollar value. As we start to get our assets in the ground, it's going to be a higher value. So if you want to join, it's going to cost more. One other thing, I'm sorry. Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus 7 in 7 project. I don't know if you know about it. They're trying to build 28,000 units in the next 7 years across Eastern Ontario. 7,000 of those would be affordable rental units. They have a website you can go to. Lisa Severinson and Kristen Myers from EOWC are here. They're listening to what's happening today. They'd be happy to talk to you, and I'm finished. Thank you. Did you want to? Yeah, if anyone wants to ask me a question, please go ahead.
Can you come to the mic, Corey?
Just curious, I've done some research on this. I'm a small developer in the area. The research that I've done on it is Ontario is one of the most difficult jurisdictions in North America to get approved, if not the most, and I think you kind of commented on to get that type of system in. And if we go through the changes, I guess, to do that, then one of the questions that I think you just answered it is on joining that communal or that group that would look after throughout Eastern Ontario. And then one of the ways that, or another question, I guess, is I looked at all the blue dots south of the border. Have you guys researched on how they're doing it down? Municipalities are handling it and looking after it down in the U.S. and how their models are working, and just rather than reinvent it, just copy what they're doing.
No, thanks for the question. So the Federal Housing and Urban Development, they got it 20 years ago. They figured out if we want to keep the rural communities going, there's parts of different states like Florida, or Texas, it's really hard to put full systems in. So they've been providing a lot of funding. They've been promoting this. They're providing grants. And that's not happening in Ontario. The municipal responsibility is a deal killer in so many ways. So that's why we've set this utility up to say, come to Frontenac, you don't have to worry about that. But the environmental piece will still be challenging, but we're going to keep fighting on that as well.
But what about other provinces in Canada? I know they're doing this quite a bit in Nova Scotia, East Coast.
I know PEI is a little more liberal about it because I know a developer from my area who's down there building seniors pods on communal. I'm not aware of other jurisdictions. I mean, my focus has been on Frontenac first and foremost, but the reason I think Carolyn asked me to come here was that what we're doing in Frontenac, I think, applies to a lot of the small municipalities in Eastern Ontario.
I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. Mayor.
So thanks for presentation. It's deja vu for me because you came to Leeds Grenville to do a similar presentation for us. Since then, you really got my mental juices flowing. And I'm wondering, why are we not scaling this up to LAS? Because if the economy is scaled like your insurance analogy, right, it just seems to me that there's got to be an economy of scale there in terms of the governance structure and what have you. Why would we have to even take your example and then reinvent that wheel locally and keep on replicating that? Why don't we just all join and advocate to LAS to just get this done once and for all?
I don't know what an LAS is, sorry.
It's local authority services. It's sort of the NGO arm of AMO.
Okay.
So it offers a number of different types of programs, like streetlight programs, where they'll come in and fund the initial retrofit of LED street lighting.
Yeah.
You pay back over a number of years, and they have a number of different services. This just seems so obvious to head in that direction.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I, as part of like thinking about this, I've said to my CAO, the provinces really could make such a difference on this. They could set up a giant fund to fund these municipal service corporations as seed funding. So for our corporation, we estimate the cost is just under $700,000. The investment, 20% investment from Frontenac County. The rest is for the 4 townships based on date of assessment. Their investment will be different, and they have 5 years to put that money in. But why wouldn't the province allocate, and I'm going to say this, Prime Minister just gave billions of dollars to an EV plant, Volkswagen plant, and I'm glad to see the Minister of Housing is starting to get their act together, but where's that $1 billion investment in rural housing? Like, why I think rural all the time, and Mayor of Central Frontenac said this once to the Minister of Transportation. You don't understand, a small provincial investment goes a long way in a rural community. I worked for municipal affairs for 7 years. I know Queen's Park. I know what it's like. The world revolves around Toronto. It's hard to get them. I mean, Steve Clark, it was great to have him as minister. He understood what was going on the ground. He was very supportive of our project. But we can help build that housing in rural Ontario and keep the communities going. Thanks. Sorry about that.
All right, thank you. So we're going to end our day today with some presentations from myself, Caroline, and Chris from United Counties. Like my mayor likes to say, when the meeting's been going on for too long, can you wrap this up in 2 minutes or less? And us planners have become experts at learning how to do a presentation rather quickly when asked. So I will try not to speed too quickly through this, as many of you are already familiar with North Grenville and some of the initiatives that we've been undertaking. So you've gotten to know me today. I'm Amy Martin. I'm the Director of Planning and Development. I'm just going to highlight a few of the items that the municipality has undertaken since 2019. So in 2019, Mayor Peckford convened her Mayor's Task Force on Affordable Housing, which led to a variety of recommendations that formed the foundation for the adoption of an affordable housing strategy in 2021. And I'm happy to say that we've implemented about 50% of the recommendations coming out of that strategy. All of this can be found within my housing report card, which was presented to council in June of this year. So if you're looking at how we're monitoring our progress, there is an annual report now that goes to council as to where we're at. We also adopted a housing strategy in October of 2022. So that looked at that high-level housing, not just affordable housing, but all elements of housing across North Grenville. Certain things we have the ability to influence, certain items we do not. So in the last year, we've implemented 6 of the 30 recommendations and still have many more to go. But our planning department and municipalities working hard at ensuring that we are implementing these recommendations. I wanted to just quickly chat about some of the municipal initiatives that come out of our strategies and those recommendations. And the majority of the work that we've done in a very short amount of time is on the zoning and official plan side. So through the planning department, we were able to enact a variety of zoning changes to create better conditions for additional residential units. We removed single detached dwellings as a permitted use in the residential fourth density zone, so trying to encourage more density. And we're always continuing to look at where we can improve. In the official plan, we did update our definition of affordable to endeavor to have 25% of all new development as affordable. So these are items that we do communicate to our development community as an aspiration as to what we're trying to achieve on the affordability side. And I know there's a variety of developers who know me in this room, and I don't think any of our conversations end without a discussion about affordability. We did establish a housing advisory committee, and I do see many of my housing advisory committee members in this room, which is exciting, and thank you for your support. We do prioritize affordable projects, especially on the capacity allocation side, as we manage our wastewater capacity at our plant here in Kemptville. And we also do our best to try and streamline processes, although sometimes it doesn't feel like it. But we do have a one-window approach through our development review team, which is where we have our planning staff, engineering, our conservation authority, the counties, depending on location, you might have the Ministry of Transportation. And it gives the developers that chance to pitch their project to staff, work through some of the key issues, and identify, at the end of the day, what will become their submission checklist when they do apply for their projects. We do have our annual housing report card, which is on our website, and I encourage you to talk about it, talk about it, promote it, and review it. And I also wanted to say that one of the initiatives that we've taken an approach in the planning department is building capacity. I don't think my planning clerk ever starts a meeting off when it's silent to say, when the planner walks into the room, the first thing we're doing is we're connecting people and we're building capacity and building those connections. Some of the upcoming initiatives that we're looking at is further reform on our zoning performance standards. Our deputy mayor did bring forth a notice of motion earlier this year, asking staff to look at ways where we can make the zoning process more efficient to avoid developers having to come back to the municipality for minor variances or zoning amendments for what typically seem to be more minor issues. We will be updating our official plan with more of a focus, hopefully, on how can we create more opportunities for density and how do we identify those new areas of growth. So how do we create the opportunity for new communities without necessarily sprawling beyond our borders. We're looking at developing more educational and informational information on tiny homes and additional residential units, so residents who walk in can find out more about that, and as well as developing some additional resources and checklists for the creation of affordable units. So creating that one-stop package when a developer or a property owner comes in and has a proposed project that they want to do that could provide some more affordable units. I think I did that pretty efficiently. Thank you. And I'll invite Chris Morrison and from the counties, and then Caroline will proceed.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you. I apologize. I thought at this point I'd be bumped off, so I didn't really prepare much. So I'm here to speak to supportive housing initiatives that have occurred in Leeds and Grenville in the last little while. One of the things from COVID, one of the impacts on social services was we discovered that communal living and communal shelters is not very good when you need to lock down and when you need to isolate. So what we thought was, what if there was a way that we could build small, tiny units, self-contained units for people? So that's what we did. So what we actually did, we used Social Services Relief Fund money, approximately $1.3 million. That was money from the province that they gave out to address COVID. We purchased this church in Brockville for about $200,000. So this is what it looked like before we started. Typical church, you come in the front, there's the congregation where people stand, choir loft, some pews. This is what it looked like when we emptied it out. Another stairwell. This is what it looks like today when we finished. So we were able to create 8 small, tiny units, self-contained, furnished units. We, as the housing department, are the landlords. We work with Leeds and Grenville Mental Health and Addictions. They supply the occupants. So this was the front stairwell, first floor. There's a lift in the unit, bottom floor. So this is what the unit looks like. So there is a small fridge, full bathroom, tabletop, bed, and a locker. So the other project we did, once we finished this project, we thought to ourselves, the next round of Social Services Relief Fund money, we looked to North Grenville. And thanks to Amy, who advised us about this property that you may recognize as the courthouse building, we were able to use Social Services Relief Fund money. We rented this property from the municipality of North Grenville for $1 for the next 40 years, which allowed us to use all the Social Services Relief money, which was about approximately $1.5 million. The total cost of this project is about 1.9, so the remainder is municipal money. So we were able to get 10 units in this building, 1 2-bedroom, 1 1-bedroom, and the rest are bachelor units. 3 of the units will be for people off the by name list, which my co-worker Tracy Birch talked about this morning, which will be supported, and there is 1 youth shelter that the John Howard Society will be supporting. The rest will be rent geared to income units. And I apologize for some of these pictures. By the timing of this, we were just finishing construction. It's supposed to be done today, but it's not. So, but it will be. So this is what it looked like after we gutted the interior. So you might have recognized some of this. This is what it started to look like. One of the nice features of this building is the big windows and the high ceilings. So that's the front entrance. So this gives you kind of a sense of what the unit will be. It'll be similar. There will be a tabletop, full bathroom, and a fridge. And that's what it looks like. That was what it looked like a couple weeks ago. If you're in the area, I suggest it's on 15 Water Street. Please drive by. So some of the pros and cons of this is, when you basically rip apart a building, you can increase the energy efficiency for lower operational costs. It's already part of the community, and you're able to make it what you want. The issues that you do have, though, is you're tied to the footprint of the building, limited on space. You need to be creative. Sometimes you run into structural issues with the older buildings, and you can have engineering costs as well as a change in purpose. You need to meet the new requirements, and the abatement of designated substances can run into a problem for you. However, the takeaways, if you're going to do something like this, I would suggest that, the building should be centrally close to amenities, it integrated well into the community. Both projects are integrated very well into the community. It's great if the building is vacant, so it's positive for strict timelines of the program guidelines. The earlier project in Smith Falls, we were under those same very tight timelines. The current configuration within the building should facilitate straightforward conversion, so try not to get too fancy when you're doing your HGTV designs. That the current zoning is in place supports the creation of the units, and you really do, I can't emphasize this one enough, and it was mentioned by numerous speakers here today. If you're going to go forward with affordable housing, everyone needs to be in the boat, and we all need to be rowing in the same direction. There was community from the local municipal staff, staff at the ministry, staff within community and social services, and our community service providers that helped us with these things. We're all going in the same direction because we all want the same goal. So in closing, I'd like to thank you, and I just want to make sure my photographer, did you get the stuff for Instagram? Okay, I'm sorry. I have 8 followers, and they demand a lot of content. So if you have any questions or anything else, please, there's my deets, or I'm on Instagram. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris, for keeping us on schedule. Appreciate that. Here we go. So before we go today, I just wanted to take a moment just to talk to you a little bit some of the other housing programs that we offer for affordable housing at the counties and in Leeds and Grenville. So beyond some of the building and bricks and mortar programs that we can offer for affordable housing are some of our soft programs. So we have a housing allowance program, a home ownership program, Ontario Renovates, and a secondary suite funding program. So a housing allowance provides rental assistance directly to low-income renters to help make rents more affordable. Currently at the counties, we offer the Canada-Ontario Housing Benefit, which is jointly funded under the National Housing Strategy and is delivered by the province. This benefit allows a renter to reside anywhere in Leeds and Grenville and receive a housing subsidy, and it's also portable if they move anywhere in Ontario, so they can continue to receive that. So housing allowance is not rent geared to income, however, it does provide a deep subsidy to make rents more affordable. And applications for this benefit can be completed online or by on paper on any community and social services office in Leeds and Grenville. Oops, went too far. What slide am I on? Oh, yep, there we go. Households approved for this benefit must consent to be removed from the social housing waitlist. This is to alleviate pressure on the social housing waitlist and provides an alternative for households who have suitable housing but require some financial assistance to continue to afford it. Another program that we offer is our affordable home ownership program. So this provides down payment assistance to first-time home buyers in the form of a 20-year forgivable loan. The maximum funding is up to 5% of the purchase price to a maximum of $14,000. And this is intended for a modest home, so the maximum eligible price of the home is at this time $280,000. And this is provided in the form of a 20-year forgivable loan. This assistance that's provided is considered by CMHC as homeowner equity for the purpose of securing CMHC mortgage insurance, so that'll be a benefit to the homeowner. Another program that we offer is called Ontario Renovates, which provides a 10-year forgivable loan of up to $15,000 to low-income homeowners to make necessary repairs to their homes. So eligible applicants must meet income and asset requirements, and it's for very necessary and basic repairs. So heating, plumbing, electrical, windows, well drilling, septics, and stuff like that. So it's not for home makeovers, it's really for the basic items that are needed. Through this program, there's also a $5,000 accessibility grant that's non-repayable, and that can help make the house more accessible, such as through ramps, handrails, chair and bath lifts, height adjustments to countertops, and stuff like that. Another program, the last one I'm going to talk about today, is our secondary suite program. So they're called different things. Sometimes they're called an additional residential unit, a garden suite, an in-law suite. Essentially, they're a self-contained unit within a private kitchen, bathroom, and sleeping area, and each municipality within Leeds and Grenville has their own criteria related to the creation of a secondary suite, so the size, location, and stuff like that. But new regulations allowing the as-of-right development of up to 3 units per property does only apply to serviced lots, so on water and sewer services. We do have 2 different funding streams for this program. The homeowner program allows for a 15-year interest-free forgivable loan of up to $25,000 to create a secondary suite on the property of the applicant's primary residence. And we have a landlord program that's a 10-year interest-free forgivable loan of up to $50,000 for small landlords to create a secondary suite on the property of an existing residential rental unit. The purpose of this program is to encourage the creation of an affordable rental unit, so rents charged during the affordability period must not exceed the maximum rent table, and these rents are reviewed annually by the counties. For both programs, the homeowner or landlord will select the tenant that resides in their unit, and the tenants that reside in the unit must meet income and asset requirements, and they can be a relative of the homeowner or the landlord, so that's allowable. To apply for our programs, we have a social housing registry, so people can call the telephone number. We also have information, applications, and fact sheets online with more information. And then I wanted to make sure to add my slide in, just in terms of talking about an affordable housing initiative. So anytime after the session, please do reach out and give me a call. So if anyone has any questions for the 3 of us, please feel free to come up to the microphone. Appreciate
it. Yeah, this is for you. The home ownership program, so can someone that is eligible for a Habitat for Humanity home be eligible for that down payment under home ownership?
I do believe that this is something that we've done in the past.
Okay, second question. Looking at the limit of $280,000 for a purchase price, does it get reviewed periodically, or is this from 2000?
Yes, I wondered if that would come up today. Actually, I was invited to speak at Amy's, at the North Grenville Affordable Housing Committee, and just prior to that, I wanted to Google to make sure to see, I'm checking them all the time, obviously, but prior to that meeting, I did find one home in North Grenville that was under the purchase price and had a really nice kitchen and bathroom, actually, so I was pleasantly surprised. However, I will recognize it's very challenging to find a house that's under that limit. We are constantly monitoring the real estate market, but the limits are set by the province to a certain extent, and we do review those annually.
Okay, thank you.
Oh.
Sorry, which we are reviewing right now. Sorry, I'm here today, so I didn't get it out. But yes, the new number will be coming out shortly, and I believe it's 400,000. So.
Wow. Okay. You should have just interrupted me. Thanks.
Hello. I was very happy to come here today and listen to everybody, and I was expecting to hear a little bit more on alternative building solutions or methods. We heard a lot about conventional building and conventional financing, but the whole punchline of this summit was to build more homes faster. So doing it conventionally, how we've been doing it for the last 100 years, clearly isn't fast enough for our growth. So I was definitely just hoping to hear a little bit more about alternative building solutions or methods. So if anybody has any insight on that or any funding that's available for it, because again, we only heard about conventionally built dwelling units instead of something like a tiny home or a bunkhouse, or you did just at the very end talk about a coach home. That's what the city of Ottawa refers it to. They brought that up in 2017, that you could have a coach home as long as it's serviced by the primary dwelling unit, meaning the water and the power and the sewer is going back to wherever the primary dwelling unit is serviced. So is there, again, for building more homes faster, and you're allowed to have 3 dwelling units on a primary dwelling unit lot right now, if there is vacant land, is there any ability to change that zoning so we could build 3 small tiny homes on that instead of having 1 primary dwelling unit? Or?
Yes, thank you. I'll take the first part of that. Yes, I think today, the purpose of today, I kept hearing the word conversation, and it's good, sir, that you brought that up, because it is good to have that conversation about alternate methods of building, because you are correct. The old way, and a couple of other speakers also mentioned that we need to look at, just at the last presentation here, we need to look at the way we look at communal water instead of septic and wells. So I think today there was a lot of stuff today, and I want to just say to all of you today, as a housing manager, I was proven wrong, because I figured by this time today there'd only be like 7 people in the room, especially on a Friday. So it just shows that how much everyone is interested in this topic, and I think part of what Caroline's job will be is moving forward is to have more events like this, where maybe we can now focus on what from this event, like what you're talking about, sir, is can we focus an afternoon on just those topics so that we can really dig into it? As I like to say to my director, because she loves this, I say, well, let's give that some girth, let's some meat on the bones, let's really see what this is about. And I'll leave the other one to Amy.
You don't want to answer zoning questions? No. Hi, Dwight. Thank you for the question. So from a zoning perspective, our current zoning standards allow for, so if you have a primary unit, you can have an additional residential unit within the house as well as a standalone. But I do understand that you're talking about 3 individual standalone units. Very familiar with what you do. I just, so the audience knows, so Dwight converts shipping containers into smaller units and has had some success in the north and is looking at doing some pilot projects in the area. And it's certainly from a discussion we're starting to see from developments coming forward and conceptually at the municipal level is having those discussions as to how can we have multiple tiny homes on a property. Easier to look at that from a municipal perspective when you're within the urban service area from a servicing perspective, and as we heard from Joe today, there's solutions in which we can look at from the rural perspective, but certainly that is a limitation of our zoning, is that it typically is that standard 1 unit plus an additional residential unit on the property, so a maximum of 2, but certainly something that we can look at as part of our zone standard performances to see, are there some efficiencies in allowing up to 3? So I think it's a very good point taken. I also echo what Chris has said. There are so many topics in which we could discuss, but we're always working with our building division to see how can we work within the building code to allow for some of these creative projects to come forward to create more opportunities for housing. Are there any other questions for us?
So I'm fascinated by housing and anything related to affordable housing. And I know that it's all about building relationships, and a lot of the processes that you go through to achieve your goal, there's a relationship building exercise somewhere. What does that look like in your context when you start a project or finish a project? How do you build momentum to do it again? And what do your wins look like when you can convert a church into 8 units? How do you build that momentum in the community to then build those relationships to achieve more success and continue to build the businesses that you guys have in this area? I'm so curious because I travel the country and it looks completely different in different contexts. And in this particular context, I think it's very interesting to see how you have this housing summit happening right now. What is the next step after?
well, I'll jump in because I know I talked about building capacity, and certainly as a planner, and I'm sure many other planners in this room feel a similar way, is that our jobs are capacity builders, and it's building those relationships. And certainly it's being an advocate and pushing for things in the right way to ensure projects are getting done. And Adrian Shutt is gone for the day, but he was here from Habitat for Humanity and had always said to me, it's like, I've never had a municipality reach out to me and continue to ask me when I'm going to submit things, because we were eager to see his project get up and off the ground, being, again, the affordable units. They're building 15 just in Grenville. But he's like, with the city of Ottawa, you would never get that. And I think that's what's kind of unique to North Grenville, is that although we do have a small team, we're all very invested in having development to come forward. So that relationship building piece is all throughout the entire process. It's scheduling those meetings that we might need to push things forward with different agencies and having those right conversations. And after today, there's a lot of great ideas that we can build off of. I know my CIO has been texting me throughout the entire event and pointing things out, and we've been having those discussions, and there's been a lot of inspiration. And I hope that as each of you leave today, that you take those inspirations and you move them forward, whether it's in North Grenville or in other communities. And like I like to say, we're always here to support and have those discussions. I'm a phone call away. I love to meet with people, and I love to talk, which tends to let things draw on. But but yeah, I appreciate everything that's been said here today, and I do appreciate the question. And I'll let Chris and or Caroline to answer.
Okay. I know it's been said before today, and it does sound a cliche, but it is those conversations, and it's having conversations to find out what other groups' needs are. I look at Sandra, and I just met with her and a group of her colleagues just last week, and I always start every conversation out with, don't say that Chris Morrison, the housing manager, said this, but it's or I promised this. It's just really listening to what their needs are, and then trying to be creative and think, okay, well, I got this little piece, and you got that little piece. Maybe if we work together, we'll be able to figure out how to get what we want done. It's also, to be honest, copying other people. Like, I'm really impressed with Lanark with their 5 units. I'm really like trying to think how I can steal all that and copy that somewhere else and then take credit, because well, there's mayors, the mayors from Joint Services are here, so they're not going to know that I didn't do it. But it's just that kind of thing, the collaboration aspect of it.
And I think you hit on a key piece, and pretty much everything about today was about the relationship building and sharing the information. So I was really determined to have an in-person event because I've been talking to all of these amazing people in the past year, and I just wanted to find a way to share this information out, to learn from each other. And we have the networking lists on the table for a reason, and our name tags for a reason, so that these conversations can happen. And even as Joe was saying, I talked to Nuterra, and then they said, "Oh, you got to talk to Joe." So then that leads me to Joe, and then I brought him to our joint services because I'm like, I got to share this information because this is a really exciting thing that's happening that we can learn from. So this is just the start, and as Graham mentioned, at the end of October, we're having Affordable Housing 101 in the Go No Go game to continue the conversation. And I think it'll be important to have these purposeful get-togethers and learning events in order to keep moving things forward. So thank you.
And to close out our event, I'd like to invite Chief Administrative Officer for the Municipality of North Grenville, Karen Dunlop.
I'll be shorter than the planners. So before we leave, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone for attending. This summit provided us with the opportunity to delve deep into pressing issues of affordable housing and the opportunities that exist. The robust discussions on policy, strategies, and partnerships have laid the groundwork for the road ahead. I want to thank our honorable guests, Minister Fraser, MP Barrett, Minister Calandra, and MPP Clark for the commitment to addressing the pressing issue of affordable housing and the significant influence that they have in shaping the future of our communities. On behalf of myself and Warden Peckford, I would like to thank everyone who assisted in planning and organizing this event. I would personally like to thank Amy Martin, and Carolyn Raguto for their tireless efforts of making today happen. So thank you and have a nice weekend.